What are you doing here? The bride's voice cut through the church like a blade. Get out now. 63-year-old Martha Williams stood frozen, holding the torn invitation in her trembling hands. She had served this family for 35 years. She had raised this girl, and now, in front of hundreds of guests, she was being thrown out like trash. But what the cruel bride didn't know was that her mother had left one final surprise, a secret that would turn everything upside down. Before we continue, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. The heavy wooden doors of St. Mary's Church stood open that Saturday morning, letting in the warm June sunlight. Inside, white roses decorated every pew, their perfume filling the air. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead. Everything looked perfect for the wedding of Victoria Ashford and Richard Montgomery, two of the wealthiest young people in Charleston. Martha Williams stood near the back entrance, her dark hands smoothing down her simple gray dress. She had worked for the Ashford family for 35 years, ever since she was a young woman of 23. She had cleaned their floors, cooked their meals, and raised their children when Mrs. Eleanor Ashford became too ill to do so herself. Victoria had been just 8 years old when Martha first held her after a nightmare, rocking her gently until she fell back asleep. Now Victoria was 28 and getting married. Martha had received a formal invitation in the mail 2 months ago, written in elegant script on thick cream paper. "Your presence would honor us," it said. She had shown it to her daughter Clara with tears in her eyes. After all these years of service, they wanted her there. She felt seen, valued, appreciated. Martha arrived early, wanting to sit quietly in the back and watch the girl she had helped raise become a wife. She wore her best dress and her mother's pearl earrings, the only valuable things she owned. As she entered through the main doors, she noticed the church was already filling with guests in expensive suits and designer dresses. She felt out of place but held her head high. She belonged here. She had been invited. She found a seat in the last row and sat down carefully, her worn black purse on her lap. Other guests filtered in, their voices a low murmur of excitement. The organ music started playing softly. Martha smiled to herself, remembering how she used to help little Victoria practice walking in her mother's high heels, how they would laugh together in the kitchen while making cookies. Then she heard the sharp click of heels on the marble floor. Fast, angry steps. Martha looked up to see Victoria herself, still in her silk robe, her hair in curlers, her face flushed red with rage. Behind her rushed 2 groomsmen and Victoria's cousin, all looking uncomfortable. "What are you doing here?" Victoria's voice cut through the peaceful atmosphere like a knife. Several guests turned to look. "How dare you come in through the front entrance?" Martha stood up, confused, her heart beginning to race. "Miss Victoria, I received an invitation." "I don't care what you thought," Victoria hissed, stepping closer. Her perfume was overwhelming, expensive and cloying. "This is my wedding day, my day, and I will not have it ruined by having the help sitting among my guests like you're one of us." The words hit Martha like physical blows. She felt the blood drain from her face. Around them, guests had stopped talking. The church had gone silent, except for the organ music, which suddenly seemed too loud, almost mocking. But the invitation... Martha's voice trembled. She reached into her purse with shaking hands and pulled out the cream-colored card. "It came in the mail. I thought you wanted me here." Victoria snatched the invitation from Martha's hands and tore it in half, then in half again, letting the pieces flutter to the floor like broken promises. "My mother sent these out before she died. She was sentimental and foolish in her final days. I would never invite you to sit with my guests. If you want to attend my wedding, you can watch from the kitchen entrance in the back where you belong." Martha felt tears burning in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of all these people. She had survived too much in her 63 years to cry now. She had buried her husband young, raised 3 children alone, and worked her fingers to the bone to give them better lives. She would not give this spoiled girl the satisfaction of seeing her break. "I understand, Miss Victoria," Martha said quietly. gathering what remained of her dignity. "I will leave." "Good," Victoria said, turning on her heel. "And take the back exit. I don't want my guests watching the help parade through the church." She paused and looked back over her shoulder, her eyes cold. "And Martha? Don't bother coming back to work on Monday. Your services are no longer needed. I'm selling the house anyway." Martha walked down the aisle toward the back entrance, every step feeling like a mile. She could feel dozens of eyes on her back. Some looked away when she glanced at them. Others stared with curiosity or pity. No one said a word in her defense. Not one person. As she reached the door, she heard an elderly man's voice, thin and reedy, call out from one of the front pews. Disgraceful. Eleanor would be ashamed. But Victoria just laughed, a high, brittle sound that echoed off the stone walls. Martha stepped out into the bright sunshine. Her car, a 20-year-old sedan that barely ran, was parked 3 blocks away because she hadn't felt worthy of parking in the church lot. She walked slowly, her legs heavy, her mind spinning. 35 years of service dismissed in an instant. All those years of loyalty, of love given freely to a family that was not her own, meant nothing. She thought about Eleanor Ashford, Victoria's mother, who had died just 6 months ago after a long battle with cancer. Eleanor had been different from her daughter. Kind, thoughtful, grateful for Martha's care. In those final weeks when the pain was unbearable, Eleanor had held Martha's hand and whispered, "You've been more family to me than most of my own blood. I won't forget that. I promise." Martha had thought it was just the morphine talking, the rambling of a dying woman. Now she wondered if there had been more to those words. She reached her car and sat in the driver's seat without starting the engine. Her hands were still shaking. She had nowhere to go. Her small apartment rent was due in 2 weeks, and she had just lost her job. Her daughter Clara was struggling with her own bills, trying to put 2 kids through school. Her sons lived far away, with families and problems of their own. At 63, who would hire her? She was too old, too tired, too used up by years of hard labor. The thought of starting over made her want to scream. Martha finally started the car and drove home in a daze. She lived in a modest apartment building on the edge of town, the kind of place where paint peeled from the walls and the elevator rarely worked. She climbed the 3 flights of stairs to her door, went inside, and collapsed on her old couch. That's when she let herself cry. Deep, wrenching sobs that came from a place of profound hurt and humiliation. She cried for the little girl she had loved and raised, who had grown into such a cruel woman. She cried for Eleanor, who would have been horrified at her daughter's behavior. She cried for herself for all the years she had given to people who never truly valued her. The phone rang an hour later. Martha almost didn't answer it, but years of habit made her pick it up. "Mrs. Williams?" A man's professional voice came through the line. "This is Thomas Brennan from Brennan & Associates law firm. I've been trying to reach you for several weeks. It's regarding the estate of Mrs. Eleanor Ashford. I need you to come to my office Monday morning at 10 o'clock. It's extremely important. Mrs. Ashford left specific instructions concerning you in her will." Martha sat up straight, wiping her eyes. "The will? But I was just her employee." "Mrs. Williams," the lawyer said, his voice taking on a strange tone. "You're much more than that, according to Mrs. Ashford's final wishes. Please, it's crucial that you attend. The address is 428 Oak Street, Suite 200. Can I count on seeing you Monday at 10? "Yes," Martha whispered. "Yes, I'll be there." She hung up the phone and stared at the wall. What could Eleanor possibly have left her? Maybe a small token of appreciation, a piece of jewelry, perhaps a few $100s. It was kind, but it wouldn't solve her immediate problems. Still, somewhere deep in her chest, a small spark of hope flickered. Eleanor had said she wouldn't forget. Eleanor had promised. The weekend passed slowly. Martha tried to distract herself by cleaning her already spotless apartment, but her mind kept returning to the humiliation at the church and the mysterious phone call. She barely slept Sunday night, tossing and turning, wondering what Monday would bring. On Monday morning, Martha dressed in her most professional outfit, a navy blue dress she had worn to Eleanor's funeral. She took the bus downtown to Oak Street, where tall office buildings rose into the sky. The law firm was on the second floor of a beautiful old building with marble floors and wood-paneled walls. The receptionist, a young woman with kind eyes, smiled when Martha gave her name. "Mrs. Williams, Mr. Brennan is expecting you. Please have a seat. He'll be right with you." Martha sat in a leather chair and looked around the elegant waiting room. Oil paintings hung on the walls. Fresh flowers sat on the side tables. This was a place for important people, wealthy people. What was she doing here? "Mrs. Williams?" A tall man in his 50s with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses stood in the doorway. "I'm Thomas Brennan. Thank you so much for coming. Please follow me." Martha followed Mr. Brennan down a hallway lined with photographs of distinguished-looking men and women. They entered a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city. The lawyer gestured to a comfortable chair across from his massive mahogany desk. "Please sit down," he said warmly. "Would you like some coffee? Water?" "No, thank you," Martha said, perching on the edge of the chair. Her purse sat on her lap, her hands gripping it tightly. "Mr. Brennan, I don't understand why I'm here. Mrs. Ashford was very kind to me, but I was just her housekeeper." Mr. Brennan settled into his own chair and opened a thick file folder. He looked at Martha over his glasses, his expression serious but gentle. "Mrs. Williams, you were far more than a housekeeper to Eleanor Ashford. She made that very clear to me in our final meetings." He pulled out a document and set it on the desk between them. Martha could see Eleanor's signature at the bottom, shaky but unmistakable. "Mrs. Ashford came to see me 8 months before she passed away," Mr. Brennan began. "She was very ill by then, but her mind was sharp. She wanted to make changes to her will, significant changes. She told me that in her life she had made many mistakes, particularly regarding her family. But she said the one thing she had done right was recognizing true loyalty and genuine love when she saw it." Martha felt her throat tighten. She remembered those last months with Eleanor, the long nights sitting by her bedside, reading to her, holding her hand through the pain. Victoria had rarely visited, always too busy with wedding planning or social events. "Mrs. Ashford's estate is substantial," Mr. Brennan continued. "When her husband passed away 15 years ago, he left her everything. The house on Magnolia Avenue, various investments, stocks, bonds, and several properties around Charleston. The total value is approximately $4.2 million. Martha's eyes widened. She had known the Ashfords were wealthy, but she had never imagined such an amount. That's a fortune." "Yes, it is," Mr. Brennan agreed. "Now, Mrs. Ashford's original will left everything to her daughter Victoria, but 8 months ago she changed it." He paused, watching Martha's face carefully. "Mrs. Williams, Eleanor Ashford left you the house on Magnolia Avenue, fully paid for, along with $1 million in a trust fund that will provide you with a monthly income for the rest of your life." The room seemed to tilt. Martha gripped the arms of her chair, certain she had misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" "The house and $1 million, Mr. Brennan repeated slowly. "Additionally, she left you all of her personal jewelry, her art collection, and her library. She wanted you to have security, comfort, and dignity for the rest of your life." But Victoria," Martha stammered. "Her daughter. Surely." "Victoria receives the remaining $3.2 million in assets, properties, and investments," Mr. Brennan said. "Mrs. Ashford did not disinherit her daughter. She simply chose to recognize your years of devoted service and genuine care in a meaningful way." He slid the document across the desk. "This is all legal and binding. Mrs. Ashford was of sound mind when she made these changes. I have medical documentation to prove it, and 2 other lawyers witnessed the signing." Martha stared at the paper, but the words blurred together. Her hands shook so badly she had to clasp them together. "The house? The house where I worked all those years?" "Is now your house," Mr. Brennan confirmed. "All the utilities have been paid through a separate account for the next 2 years. The property taxes are covered by the trust fund. You can move in whenever you're ready." Tears spilled down Martha's cheeks. She didn't try to stop them this time. These were different tears, tears of shock and disbelief and overwhelming gratitude. Why didn't anyone tell me? Why didn't Victoria know? "Mr." Brennan's expression darkened slightly. Mrs. Ashford specifically requested that Victoria not be informed until after the wedding. She didn't want anything to disrupt her daughter's big day. She hoped that marriage might mature Victoria, make her more compassionate. He shook his head. Mrs. Ashford loved her daughter deeply, despite Victoria's flaws. She wanted to give her one last perfect moment before the truth came out. "Victoria's selling the house," Martha said suddenly, remembering the cruel words at the church. "She told me she's selling it." "She can't," Mr. Brennan said firmly. "She doesn't own it. She never did, not after the will was changed. I've been trying to reach Victoria for weeks to inform her of the will's contents, but she's been avoiding my calls. I suspect she assumed she was inheriting everything and didn't want to deal with legal details until after her honeymoon." Martha felt a strange mixture of emotions. Relief, certainly. Joy at the unexpected blessing, but also sadness for Eleanor, who had died hoping her daughter might change. And underneath it all, a growing sense of justice. Victoria had humiliated her, fired her, treated her like garbage in front of hundreds of people. And all along, Martha had owned the very house Victoria thought was hers to sell. "What happens now?" Martha asked. "I'll arrange for the keys to be delivered to you today, Mr. Brennan said. "I'll also set up your trust fund account and transfer the jewelry and other items to your possession. As for Victoria, I'll need to meet with her this week to inform her of the situation. It's going to be quite a shock." "She'll contest it," Martha said with certainty. "She'll fight this in court." Mr. Brennan smiled slightly. "She can try, but Mrs. Ashford anticipated that possibility. The will is ironclad. She had 3 psychiatric evaluations in the weeks before she signed it, all confirming her mental competence. She wrote detailed letters explaining her reasoning. She even made a video recording stating her wishes." He leaned forward. "Mrs. Williams, Eleanor Ashford wanted to ensure that you were taken care of. She saw Victoria's true nature, even if she couldn't bear to admit it fully. She knew her daughter would squander an inheritance on expensive parties and designer clothes. But she also knew you would use this blessing wisely, that you would finally have the peace and security you deserved." Martha wiped her eyes with a tissue Mr. Brennan handed her. "I don't know what to say. I never expected anything like this. I loved her. Mrs. Eleanor was good to me. I would have cared for her without any reward. She knew that," Mr. Brennan said softly. "That's exactly why she left you these things. Because you never asked for them, never expected them, never felt entitled to them." They spent the next hour going over paperwork. Martha signed document after document, her hand cramping from the unfamiliar signatures. Mr. Brennan explained the trust fund in detail. She would receive $5,000 per month for the rest of her life, more than enough to live comfortably. The principal would never decrease. If anything remained when she passed away, it would go to her children. When they finished, Mr. Brennan stood and shook her hand. "Congratulations, Mrs. Williams. You're a homeowner and a woman of independent means. I'll have my assistant deliver the keys to your current address this afternoon. Is there anything else you need?" Martha thought for a moment. "When will you tell Victoria?" "I'm meeting with her and her new husband on Wednesday afternoon. They return from their weekend honeymoon tomorrow evening." He paused. "Would you like to be there?" Martha's first instinct was to say no. She didn't want another confrontation, didn't want to see Victoria's anger and accusations. But then she remembered standing in that church, the torn invitation fluttering to the floor, the cold dismissal, the humiliation. She thought about all the years she had been treated as less than, as invisible, as someone whose feelings didn't matter. "Yes," Martha said quietly but firmly. "Yes, I would like to be there." Mr. Brennan nodded approvingly. "Then I'll arrange it. Wednesday at 2 o'clock here in my office." Martha left the law office in a daze. She walked down the street without really seeing where she was going. Her mind raced with everything that had just happened. She was wealthy. She owned a house, a beautiful, enormous house in the best neighborhood in Charleston, the same house she had cleaned for 35 years, where she had scrubbed floors and washed windows and cooked meals. Now it was hers. She found a bench in a small park and sat down, needing to process everything. An elderly man feeding pigeons nearby smiled at her. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" he said. "Yes," Martha replied, and for the first time in days, she meant it. "Yes, it really is." That afternoon, a courier arrived at her apartment with an envelope containing 2 sets of keys and the alarm code for the house on Magnolia Avenue. Martha held the keys in her hand, feeling their weight. They were real. This was really happening. She called her daughter Clara. "Honey, can you come over? I need to tell you something." Clara arrived an hour later, worried by the tone of her mother's voice. "Mama, what's wrong? Did something else happen after that awful scene at the wedding?" Martha sat her daughter down and told her everything. Clara's mouth fell open further with each detail. When Martha finished, Clara burst into tears and hugged her mother so tightly Martha could barely breathe. "Mama, this is a miracle," Clara sobbed. "After everything you've been through, everything you've sacrificed for us. God is good, Mama. He saw you. He rewarded you." They cried together, holding each other, processing the magnitude of what had happened. Then Clara pulled back, her eyes suddenly fierce. "That Victoria better not come around causing trouble. After the way she treated you." "She doesn't know yet," Martha said. "Mr. Brennan is telling her on Wednesday. I'm going to be there." Clara's eyes widened. "Are you sure that's a good idea?" Martha thought about it. Was it? Part of her wanted to avoid the confrontation entirely, to simply move into her new house and never see Victoria again. But another part, a part that had been silent for too long, wanted to look Victoria in the eye when she learned the truth. Not to gloat, not to be cruel, but simply to be present, to exist as a person who mattered, whose worth had been recognized. "I'm sure," Martha said. "I need to do this." Tuesday passed in a strange blur. Martha visited the house on Magnolia Avenue for the first time as its owner. She drove up the circular driveway and sat in her car for several minutes, just staring at the grand white columns and the wraparound porch. It was a beautiful home, built in the 1920s, with tall windows and mature oak trees shading the lawn. She used her key to open the front door. The familiar scent hit her immediately, a mixture of lemon polish and the lavender sachets Eleanor had loved. Martha walked through the rooms slowly, seeing them with new eyes. The living room where she had dusted countless antiques. The dining room where she had served hundreds of meals. The kitchen where she had spent thousands of hours preparing food. But now it was different. These weren't spaces where she worked. These were her spaces. Her home. She climbed the grand staircase, running her hand along the smooth banister. Upstairs were 5 bedrooms. The master bedroom where Eleanor had died was the largest. Martha stood in the doorway, remembering those final days. Eleanor had been so weak by the end, but she had squeezed Martha's hand and smiled. "Thank you for everything," she had whispered. "Thank you for seeing me as a person, not just a wealthy woman to impress." Martha chose a different bedroom for herself, a sunny room at the back of the house that overlooked the garden. It had pale yellow walls and white curtains that moved gently in the breeze from the open window. She had always loved this room when she cleaned it. She spent the afternoon walking through the house, making mental notes. Some repairs were needed. The roof had a small leak. Several windows needed new paint. But these were her problems now, her decisions to make. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. That night Martha barely slept. Wednesday loomed ahead of her like a mountain to climb. She kept rehearsing what she might say, how she might react to Victoria's anger. But she also kept reminding herself of what Mr. Brennan had said. The will was ironclad. Nothing Victoria said or did could change it. Wednesday morning, Martha dressed carefully. She wore a simple but elegant navy dress that Clara had helped her pick out the day before, and Eleanor's pearl necklace, which had been delivered to her along with the rest of the jewelry. Looking at herself in the mirror, Martha barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked dignified, composed, strong. Clara offered to come with her for support, but Martha declined. "I need to do this alone, honey. But thank you." She arrived at Mr. Brennan's office at 1:30, wanting to be there before Victoria. Mr. Brennan greeted her warmly and showed her to his office. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Nervous," Martha admitted, "but ready." "Good," he said. "Now, I want you to know that I'll be doing most of the talking. This is a legal matter and I'll handle it professionally. But you have every right to be here. Mrs. Ashford wanted you to be taken care of, and that's exactly what's happening." At precisely 2 o'clock, the receptionist buzzed. "Mr. and Mrs. Montgomery are here." "Send them in," Mr. Brennan said. Martha's heart pounded as she heard voices in the hallway. Then the door opened, and Victoria walked in, followed by her new husband, Richard. They were both dressed expensively, Victoria in a cream-colored designer suit, and Richard in a tailored navy blazer. Victoria stopped dead when she saw Martha sitting in the chair by the window. Her face went through several expressions in rapid succession: surprise, confusion, then anger. "What is she doing here?" Victoria demanded, pointing at Martha. "Is this some kind of joke?" "Mrs. Montgomery, please sit down," Mr. Brennan said calmly, gesturing to the chairs across from his desk. "We have important matters to discuss regarding your mother's estate." "I don't want to discuss anything with her in the room," Victoria said coldly. "She's nobody. She doesn't belong here." Richard touched his wife's arm. "Victoria, maybe we should just hear what the lawyer has to say." Victoria shot him an annoyed look, but sat down stiffly. Richard took the chair beside her, looking uncomfortable. Martha noticed he kept glancing at her with something that looked like embarrassment. Mr. Brennan opened the thick file folder on his desk. "Thank you both for coming. I've been trying to reach you for several weeks to discuss your mother's will. As you know, Mrs. Eleanor Ashford passed away 6 months ago. Her will was changed 8 months before her death, and those changes are significant." "Changed?" Victoria's voice was sharp. "What do you mean, changed?" "She left everything to me. That was always the plan." "That was the original plan, yes," Mr. Brennan agreed. "However, your mother came to me 8 months before she died and made substantial revisions. She was of completely sound mind, and the changes were witnessed by multiple parties and documented thoroughly." He slid a document across the desk. Victoria snatched it up and began reading. Martha watched as the color drained from her face. "This is a mistake," Victoria said, her voice rising. "This has to be a mistake. The house? $1 million to her?" She jabbed a finger toward Martha without looking at her. "To the maid?" "Mrs. Williams was far more than a maid to your mother, Mr. Brennan said firmly. "She was a companion, a caregiver, and someone your mother trusted and valued deeply. Mrs. Ashford wanted to ensure that Mrs. Williams was provided for after her years of devoted service." "Devoted service?" Victoria laughed, but there was no humor in it. It was a brittle, angry sound. "She was paid to do a job. That's what servants do. You pay them, they work. That's the arrangement." Martha felt her jaw tighten, but she remained silent. Brennan had told her to let him handle this, and she would. "Your mother saw it differently," Mr. Brennan continued. "She wrote several letters explaining her decision. Would you like me to read them?" "No, I don't want you to read them," Victoria snapped. She was on her feet now, pacing. "I want you to explain how this is legal. How can she just give away my inheritance?" "It was her property to distribute as she wished," Mr. Brennan said calmly. "You still inherit substantially, Mrs. Montgomery. The remaining $3.2 million in assets, properties, and investments. Your mother did not disinherit you." "But the house," Victoria's voice cracked. "That's my family home. I grew up there. She can't just give it to a stranger." "I'm not a stranger," Martha said quietly. It was the first time she had spoken, and everyone turned to look at her. "I took care of your mother for 35 years. I was there when you weren't. I held her hand when she was in pain. I sat with her through the long nights when she was scared and alone." "You were paid to do that," Victoria shouted, whirling to face her. Don't act like you did it out of the goodness of your heart. You were paid." "I was paid to clean and cook," Martha replied, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. "I wasn't paid to love her. I wasn't paid to read to her for hours when she couldn't sleep. I wasn't paid to listen to her talk about her life, her regrets, her hopes. I did those things because I cared about her." "How touching," Victoria said with heavy sarcasm. "You must have been very persuasive in those final months. Did you plant ideas in her head when she was weak and sick? Did you convince her to change her will?" "Mrs. Montgomery," Mr. Brennan's voice was like ice, "I will not allow you to make accusations of undue influence. Your mother came to me independently. I questioned her extensively about her decision. I had her examined by psychiatrists to ensure she was competent. She knew exactly what she was doing and she explained her reasoning clearly." He pulled out another document. "In fact, she anticipated that you might react this way. She wrote you a letter. Would you like to read it?" Victoria stared at the envelope Mr. Brennan held out. For a moment, something flickered across her face. Vulnerability, perhaps, or fear. Then her expression hardened again. "Fine. Give it to me." "Mr." Brennan handed her the sealed envelope. Victoria tore it open and pulled out several handwritten pages. Martha could see Eleanor's familiar looping handwriting. Victoria read in silence, her face growing paler with each page. Richard tried to read over her shoulder, but she angled the letter away from him. When she finished, Victoria's hands were shaking. She looked at Martha with an expression that was equal parts hurt and rage. She said I disappointed her, that I had become shallow and cruel, that I only cared about money and status. Her voice broke. She said Martha showed her more genuine love than I ever did. The office was silent, except for the ticking of the clock on the wall. Martha felt a wave of sadness wash over her. She hadn't wanted this. She hadn't asked for any of it. She had just done what came naturally, caring for someone who needed care. "Your mother loved you very much," Martha said softly. "She talked about you constantly. She kept every photo, every card you ever sent her. She was so proud when you got engaged. All she wanted was for you to be happy." "Don't," Victoria said, her voice thick with tears she was fighting to hold back. "Don't you dare talk about my mother like you knew her better than I did." "But I did," Martha said gently. "In those last months, I did. And she wanted me to tell you something if this moment ever came. She wanted you to know that she never stopped hoping you would change. She never stopped loving you. But she also couldn't ignore what she saw, who you had become." Victoria's face crumpled. For just a moment, she looked like the little girl Martha remembered, the one who used to help bake cookies and laugh at silly jokes. Then the mask came back, harder than before. "You've won," Victoria said bitterly. "You manipulated a dying woman, and you've won. I hope you enjoy living in that house, knowing you stole it from its rightful owner." "I didn't steal anything," Martha said, standing up. "Your mother gave me a gift. I never asked for it, never expected it. But I won't apologize for accepting it." "We're going to fight this," Victoria said, turning to Richard. "Aren't we? We'll get lawyers. We'll contest the will. We'll prove she was manipulated." Richard looked extremely uncomfortable. "Victoria, I don't think that's a good idea. You heard what Mr. Brennan said. The will is solid. You're taking her side?" Victoria's voice rose to a near shriek. "I'm not taking anyone's side," Richard said carefully. "I'm just saying that maybe we should accept this and move on. You still have more than $3 million. That's not nothing." Victoria's face flushed red. "Get out," she said to Martha. "Get out of this office. Get out of my mother's house. Get out of my life." "It's not your mother's house anymore," Martha said quietly but firmly. "It's mine. And I think your mother would want me to tell you one more thing. She said that material wealth means nothing if you don't have love in your heart. She said she hoped that someday you would understand that." Martha picked up her purse and walked to the door. She paused and looked back at Victoria, who stood rigid with anger and hurt. "I'm sorry for your pain," Martha said. "I truly am. But I'm not sorry for accepting your mother's gift." She wanted me to be taken care of, and I'm going to honor that wish." She left the office, closing the door softly behind her. In the hallway, she leaned against the wall for a moment, her legs shaking. She could hear Victoria's raised voice through the door, though she couldn't make out the words. The receptionist caught her eye and smiled sympathetically. "Are you all right, Mrs. Williams?" "Yes," Martha said, and she realized it was true. "Yes, I am." The following weeks brought changes that Martha could hardly believe. She moved out of her small apartment and into the house on Magnolia Avenue. Clara and her grandchildren came to help, and they spent an entire weekend carrying boxes and furniture. The children ran through the big house with delight, their laughter echoing off the high ceilings. "Grandma, you have a library," her 10-year-old grandson Marcus shouted. "With a sliding ladder like in the movies." Martha stood in the doorway of Eleanor's beloved library, looking at the floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with thousands of books. Eleanor had spent hours here, and now it belonged to Martha. She ran her fingers along the spines, reading the titles. Classic literature, poetry, history, art books. Eleanor had written notes in many of them, little thoughts and observations in the margins. Clara came up behind her and put an arm around her mother's shoulders. "You deserve this, Mama. After everything you've been through, everything you've sacrificed, this is your time." Martha settled into her new life slowly. She hired a young woman named Rosa to help with the cleaning, something that felt strange at first. But the house was too big for her to manage alone, and she remembered what Eleanor had taught her. Accepting help wasn't weakness, it was wisdom. She began attending a local church, one that Eleanor had mentioned, but Victoria had always been too busy to visit with her mother. The congregation was warm and welcoming, a mix of people from all walks of life. When Martha introduced herself, several people remembered Eleanor and expressed their condolences. No one treated Martha differently when they learned she lived in the big house on Magnolia Avenue. They saw her as simply Martha, a woman of faith and kindness. But Victoria's shadow hung over everything. True to her word, Victoria hired expensive lawyers and filed a lawsuit contesting the will. The papers were served to Martha one morning while she was planting flowers in the front garden. A process server handed her the thick envelope and walked away without a word. Martha called Mr. Brennan immediately. "Don't worry," he assured her. "We expected this. The will is solid. This lawsuit will go nowhere, but it might take several months to resolve. Are you prepared for that?" "I am," Martha said. She had come too far to back down now. The lawsuit became public, and the local newspaper ran a story about it. Heiress contests mother's will, claims undue influence by housekeeper. The article was relatively neutral, presenting both sides, but Martha felt the sting of seeing her life reduced to a scandalous headline. The reaction in the community was mixed. Some people, particularly those from wealthy families like Victoria's, were sympathetic to Victoria. They couldn't imagine leaving such a valuable property to a servant, no matter how long she had worked for the family. But others, especially those who had known Eleanor personally, defended Martha. "Eleanor Ashford was the kindest woman I ever knew," one former neighbor told a reporter. "If she left her house to Martha Williams, she had good reason. I saw how Martha cared for her in those final months. That young woman Victoria barely visited." The tension came to a head one Sunday morning when Martha was leaving church. She was walking to her car, chatting with one of the other parishioners, when a luxury sedan pulled up beside her. Victoria stepped out, her face hard and determined. "We need to talk," Victoria said, not bothering with pleasantries. The other parishioner squeezed Martha's hand and quietly walked away, sensing the confrontation. Martha stood her ground, her purse clutched in her hands. "What do you want, Victoria?" "I want you to be reasonable," Victoria said, her voice tight with barely controlled anger. "This lawsuit is costing both of us money. Legal fees are piling up. You can't win, Martha. Even if the court sides with you, and that's a big if, do you really want to live in that house knowing the whole town is talking about you? Knowing that half the people think you're a gold digger who manipulated a sick old woman?" Martha felt the words like a slap, but she kept her voice steady. "I know the truth. Your mother knew the truth. That's all that matters to me." "The truth?" Victoria laughed harshly. The truth is that you wormed your way into my mother's confidence when she was weak and vulnerable. You saw an opportunity and you took it. Is that really what you believe? Martha asked softly. That I'm capable of such cruelty? Victoria, I changed your diapers when you were a baby. I taught you how to tie your shoes. I held you when you cried after your first heartbreak. Do you really think I would manipulate your dying mother for money? For a moment, something flickered in Victoria's eyes, a memory perhaps, or a doubt. But then her expression hardened again. People change. Money changes people. Yes, it does. Martha agreed quietly. It certainly changed you. Victoria's face flushed red. How dare you? Your mother saw it, Martha continued, her voice gentle but firm. She watched you become someone she didn't recognize. Someone who cared more about designer handbags than about people. Someone who fired a woman who had served her family for 35 years because she didn't want her sitting at her wedding. I don't have to listen to this, Victoria said, turning back toward her car. Your mother left you a letter, Martha called after her. In the library at the house. She wrote it years ago and asked me to put it in a specific book when the time was right. I haven't touched it. It's still there, waiting for you. Victoria paused, her hand on the car door. What book? Jane Eyre. Your mother's favorite. She said you would remember reading it together when you were young. Victoria stood frozen for a long moment. Then, without another word, she got in her car and drove away. That afternoon, Martha was in the garden when she heard the doorbell. She wasn't expecting anyone, and her heart sank when she opened the door to find Victoria standing there, alone this time. I want to see the letter, Victoria said, her voice lacking its usual sharp edge. She looked tired, Martha noticed, with dark circles under her eyes. Martha stepped aside and let her in. They walked through the house in silence, Victoria's heels clicking on the hardwood floors. In the library, Martha went directly to the shelf where Eleanor's beloved first edition of Jane Eyre stood. She pulled it out and handed it to Victoria. She put it here herself about 2 years before she died, Martha said. She told me to give it to you only when you were ready to hear what she had to say. Victoria took the book with trembling hands and opened it. Inside, folded carefully, was a letter in Eleanor's handwriting. Victoria sank into one of the leather armchairs and began to read. Martha quietly left the room, giving Victoria privacy. She went to the kitchen and made tea, something to occupy her hands while she waited. 20 minutes passed, then 30. Finally, she heard footsteps. Victoria appeared in the doorway. Her face was blotchy from crying, her makeup ruined. She looked younger somehow, more vulnerable than Martha had seen her in years. She wrote this 2 years ago, Victoria said, her voice hoarse. Before she was even sick, she already knew who I was becoming. She already saw what I couldn't see in myself. Martha poured a cup of tea and handed it to Victoria, who took it automatically. She wrote about when I was little, Victoria continued, staring into the teacup. About how kind I used to be, how I used to save my allowance to buy presents for you and the other staff at Christmas, how I used to help you bake cookies for the homeless shelter. She looked up at Martha with red, swollen eyes. I don't even remember that girl. She's still in there somewhere, Martha said gently. Victoria shook her head. I don't think she is. I think she's gone, replaced by this bitter, angry woman who cares about all the wrong things. She set down the teacup, her hands shaking. My mother wrote that she hoped losing everything would be the wake-up call I needed, that maybe if I didn't have the comfort of inheriting everything, I would have to become a better person. You didn't lose everything, Martha pointed out. You inherited over $3 million. But I lost her respect, Victoria said, tears spilling down her cheeks again. I lost her good opinion. And I lost it before she died, which means I can never get it back. I can never apologize. I can never make it right. Martha sat down across from Victoria. Your mother loved you until her last breath. She never stopped loving you. She just wanted you to be a better person than you were choosing to be. And you, Victoria said, looking at Martha as if truly seeing her for the first time in years. You were there for her when I wasn't. You gave her comfort when I was too busy with my own life. You earned this house, Martha. You earned everything she left you." The words hung in the air between them. Martha felt tears prick her own eyes. This was what Eleanor had hoped for, she realized. Not a legal battle, not bitterness and fighting, but this moment of clarity. "The lawsuit," Martha said carefully. "Are you going to continue it?" Victoria was quiet for a long moment. Then she shook her head. "No. I'll drop it tomorrow. My lawyers will think I'm crazy, but I don't care. This house is yours. It should be yours." She stood up, composing herself. "I should go. Richard is waiting. He doesn't know I came here." Martha walked her to the door. On the threshold, Victoria paused. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "For everything. For the church. For the things I said, for the way I treated you, I'm sorry. I forgive you," Martha said simply. Victoria nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat, and walked to her car. Martha watched her drive away, feeling a complex mixture of emotions. Relief, certainly. Sadness for Eleanor, who had died without seeing her daughter's change of heart. But also hope that perhaps it wasn't too late for Victoria to find her way back to the person she used to be. The lawsuit was officially dropped 3 days later. Mr. Brennan called Martha with the news, his voice pleased and relieved. "It's over, Mrs. Williams. The house is legally and permanently yours with no further challenges possible. Congratulations." Martha thanked him and hung up the phone, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. She walked through the house that evening, touching the walls, looking at the paintings, standing in each room. This was her home now, truly and completely. The months that followed brought an unexpected rhythm to Martha's life. She spent her mornings in the garden, tending to the roses that Eleanor had loved. She spent her afternoons in the library, reading books she had never had time for before. In the evenings, she often had Clara and the grandchildren over for dinner, filling the big house with laughter and life. She also began volunteering at a shelter for homeless women and children, something Eleanor had done quietly for years. Martha used part of her monthly income to donate supplies and her time to help serve meals and organize donations. The work filled her with purpose and reminded her that wealth meant nothing if you didn't use it to help others. 6 months after the lawsuit was dropped, Martha received an unexpected letter. The return address was Victoria's. Martha opened it carefully, unsure what to expect. "Dear Martha," it began in Victoria's elegant handwriting. "I've been seeing a therapist since our last conversation. She's helping me understand how I became the person I was, and more importantly, how to become someone better. I've joined the board of the women's shelter where you volunteer. I hope that's okay. I want to learn from you if you'll let me. I want to understand what my mother saw in you that she couldn't find in me anymore. Would you be willing to meet for coffee sometime? No pressure if you'd rather not. I would understand. Sincerely, Victoria." Martha read the letter 3 times. Then she picked up her phone and called Victoria's number. Victoria answered on the second ring, her voice tentative. "Hello? Coffee sounds lovely," Martha said. "How about Thursday afternoon?" They met at a small cafe downtown, far from the fancy places Victoria used to frequent. Victoria arrived first, dressed more simply than Martha had ever seen her, in jeans and a modest blouse. When Martha walked in, Victoria stood up nervously. "Thank you for coming," Victoria said as they sat down. "I wasn't sure you would." "I almost didn't," Martha admitted. "But then I thought about your mother and what she would want. She would want us to try." They talked for over 2 hours. Victoria shared details about her therapy, how she was learning to recognize the ways she had let materialism and social status define her worth. She talked about her marriage to Richard, which was struggling under the weight of her personality change. "He married the old Victoria," she said sadly, "the one who cared about parties and appearances. He doesn't know what to do with this version of me, the one who wants to volunteer at shelters and have real conversations about meaningful things." "Give him time," Martha advised. "Change is hard for everyone, not just the person changing." Victoria asked Martha about her life, really asked, seeming genuinely interested in the answers. She wanted to know about Martha's childhood, about how she had managed to raise 3 children alone after her husband died, about what gave her such strength and grace. It wasn't grace, Martha said with a small laugh. It was necessity. When you're a single mother with 3 mouths to feed and no safety net, you don't have the luxury of falling apart. You just keep going, one day at a time. But you never became bitter, Victoria said. Even when life was unfair, even when people treated you as less than, you stayed kind. How? Martha thought about it for a moment. I think it's because I always knew that how people treated me said more about them than it said about me. My worth wasn't determined by how others saw me. It was determined by how I saw myself, and by how God saw me. She reached across the table and covered Victoria's hand with her own. Your mother knew that truth. That's why she wanted you to learn it too. Their coffee meetings became a regular occurrence. Every Thursday afternoon, Martha and Victoria would meet at the same cafe and talk. Slowly, carefully, something like a friendship began to form. It wasn't the relationship of Martha the servant and Victoria the employer. It was something new, something built on mutual respect and honest communication. Victoria threw herself into the shelter work with surprising dedication. She donated money, yes, but she also showed up to serve meals, to sort donations, to sit and talk with the women staying there. Martha watched her with a mixture of pride and amazement. This was the girl Eleanor had remembered, the kind-hearted child who wanted to help others. One evening, about a year after Victoria had dropped the lawsuit, Martha received an urgent phone call. It was Richard, Victoria's husband, and his voice was strained with worry. Martha, I need your help. Victoria's at the hospital. She collapsed at the shelter this afternoon. They think it might be her heart. Martha's own heart seized with fear. I'll be right there. She arrived at the hospital to find Richard pacing in the waiting room, his face pale and drawn. They're running tests, he said. They won't tell me anything yet. What happened? Martha asked, sitting down beside him. She's been working herself too hard, Richard said, running his hands through his hair. At the shelter, at her therapy, at everything. It's like she's trying to make up for lost time, trying to prove she's changed. I kept telling her to slow down, but she wouldn't listen. 2 hours later, a doctor came out to speak with them. Victoria had experienced a cardiac event, stress-induced, but thankfully not a full heart attack. She would need rest, significant lifestyle changes, and ongoing monitoring. But she would be okay. When they were finally allowed to see her, Victoria was propped up in bed, looking small and frightened. Her eyes filled with tears when she saw Martha. I'm sorry, Victoria whispered. I've been so stupid, trying to change everything about myself all at once. Trying to become perfect instead of just becoming better. Martha sat on the edge of the bed and took Victoria's hand. Your mother didn't want you to be perfect. She just wanted you to be genuine, to care about the right things. But she also wanted you to take care of yourself. I don't know how to find balance, Victoria admitted. I don't know how to be a good person without exhausting myself trying to prove I'm a good person. Then let me teach you, Martha said gently. The way I learned. One day at a time. One small kindness at a time. You don't have to save the world. You just have to show up and do your best. Richard stepped forward, his eyes red-rimmed. I've been a fool too, he said to Victoria. I fell in love with the woman you were becoming, not the woman you used to be. I was just scared of the change, but I see now that you're finding yourself, and I want to be part of that journey if you'll let me. Victoria burst into tears, reaching for both of them. I don't deserve either of you. Love isn't about deserving, Martha said. It's about choosing every single day to show up and care. That's all any of us can do. Victoria spent 3 days in the hospital, and Martha visited every day, bringing books from Eleanor's library and reading aloud like she used to do for Eleanor. Richard sat on the other side of the bed, holding his wife's hand, and Martha could see the love between them healing and growing stronger. On the day Victoria was discharged, she asked Martha to drive her somewhere before going home. "There's a place I need to go," she said mysteriously. They drove to the cemetery where Eleanor was buried. Victoria had been there only twice since the funeral, both times brief, uncomfortable visits. But now she walked purposefully to her mother's grave, with Martha following a few steps behind. Victoria knelt on the grass beside the simple but elegant headstone. "I'm sorry, Mom," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry I wasn't the daughter you deserved. I'm sorry I wasted so much time being someone I'm not proud of. But I'm trying now. I'm really trying. And I have Martha to thank for that. You were right about her. About everything." Martha knelt beside Victoria and put an arm around her shoulders. They stayed there for a long time, two women connected by their love for a remarkable woman who had changed both their lives. As they drove back toward town, Victoria turned to Martha. "I want to ask you something, and please feel free to say no. But Richard and I have been talking, and we'd like to start a foundation in my mother's name. Something that helps women who are in the position you were in. Hard-working women who've spent their lives caring for others but who have no financial security for their own old age. Would you consider being on the board? Helping us make decisions about who to help and how?" Martha felt tears spring to her eyes. Eleanor would love that. "Is that a yes?" Victoria asked hopefully. "That's a yes," Martha confirmed. The Eleanor Ashford Foundation was established 6 months later. It provided financial assistance, job training, and support services to women who had spent their lives in domestic service. Victoria threw herself into the project with the same dedication she had once given to planning parties, but now with genuine purpose behind it. Martha worked alongside her, interviewing applicants, reviewing cases, and using her own experience to identify women who truly needed help. The foundation helped dozens of women in its first year alone, providing everything from emergency rent assistance to funding for education programs that would help them build new careers. 2 years after that confrontation in the church, Martha sat in the library of her home, reading peacefully on a Sunday afternoon. She heard a car in the driveway and looked out to see Victoria's car. But Victoria wasn't alone. She and Richard got out, and Richard carefully lifted a small bundle from the back seat. Martha opened the door before they could knock, her eyes widening. "Is that—" "Her name is Eleanor," Victoria said, her face glowing with pride and joy as she held out the baby. "Eleanor Martha Montgomery. We wanted to honor both of the women who taught us what really matters in life." Martha took the baby into her arms, looking down at the tiny face. Eleanor's granddaughter, named partly for her. The weight of the honor hit her all at once, and tears rolled down her cheeks. "Would you consider being her godmother?" Victoria asked softly. "I know that's a lot to ask after everything, but I can't imagine anyone else in that role. I want my daughter to grow up knowing you, learning from you, understanding what true goodness looks like." "I would be honored," Martha whispered, unable to take her eyes off the baby. They sat in the library that afternoon, the 3 adults taking turns holding baby Eleanor, talking about the future and the past, about mistakes and redemption, about the unexpected ways life could surprise you. Martha looked around the room at the books Eleanor Sr. had loved, at the house she had never imagined would be hers, at the young couple who had become like family. She thought about that morning in the church, when she had been humiliated and dismissed, when she had felt invisible and worthless. She thought about the will that had changed everything, the gift that Eleanor had given her, not just of property and money, but of dignity and recognition. But the greatest gift, Martha realized, wasn't the house or the money. It was this: the chance to help Victoria find her way back to the person she was meant to be. The opportunity to see Eleanor's granddaughter grow up knowing that worth wasn't measured in wealth, but in character. The knowledge that sometimes the end of one chapter was just the beginning of an even better story. As the afternoon sun streamed through the library windows, casting golden light across the room, Martha held little Eleanor close and began to tell her a story. "Once upon a time," she said softly, "there was a woman named Eleanor who understood something very important, that the truest treasures in life can't be counted in dollars or kept in a bank. They're kept in the heart, in the connections we make, in the lives we touch, in the love we give away freely, expecting nothing in return. Victoria listened with tears in her eyes, holding Richard's hand. And in that moment, Martha knew that Eleanor Sr. was smiling down on all of them, pleased that her final gift had borne fruit more precious than any material inheritance. The house on Magnolia Avenue had witnessed a lifetime of service, of quiet dignity, of love given without expectation of reward. Now it would witness something new, a family bound not by blood but by respect, gratitude, and the understanding that the most valuable inheritance any of us can leave is the example of how to live a life that matters. And Martha Williams, who had spent 63 years being told she was less than, finally understood what Eleanor had known all along. Her worth had never been in question. She had always been enough. She had always been valuable. She had always been loved. The sun set over Charleston that evening, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, and in the big house on Magnolia Avenue, laughter rang out as a new chapter began for a family that had been broken and made whole again. What did you think of Martha's incredible journey? Stories like this remind us that dignity and kindness are never wasted, and that sometimes justice comes when we least expect it. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to hear that their worth is not determined by how others treat them. And remember, the most valuable things in life cannot be bought. They are earned through love, loyalty, and living with integrity. Thank you for listening, and may you always recognize the true treasures in your own life.